Namaskar. Hello and welcome to the day three of Integral Indic Intelligence Forum 2025, by way of which we are commemorating the historic 60 years of the doctrine of integral humanism, which was propounded by Pandit Deendayal Upadhyay ji uh, between 22nd to 25th of April 1965 in Mumbai. Deendayal ji gave a series of historic lectures propounding the very political doctrine of integral humanism, and which carries its weight because of its phenomenal midpoint avatar. And according to Pandit Deendayal ji, the primary concern in India should be to develop an indigenous development model that has human beings as its core focus. It is opposed to both Western capitalist individualism and Marxist socialism, though welcoming to Western science. Integral humanism seeks a middle ground between capitalism and socialism, evaluating both systems on their respective merits while being critical of their excesses and alienness. So we have been covering these historic lectures for the last 2 days, and today we would be delving deep into the lecture three, uh, which talks a lot about dharma in a very elaborate fashion. And these lectures are very short, from that matter. Across the world, political thinkers of all hues have come with their tomes of philosophical wisdom, and their followers have tried to catch up with their intellectual rigor. But Deen Dayal ji, being a savant of Sanatan Bharat, believed in brevity, as but brevity with sar garbhita, and putting integral humanism into action remains quite a challenge. But then, in these very short, concise lectures, he is able to encapsulate the entire Bharatiya Gyan Parampara in a phenomenal fashion, as you would see while devouring it across. And at Rethink India Institute, we are committed and we are trying hard to take इंटीग्रल ह्यूमैनिज्म फर्दर एंड फॉरवर्ड. और जैसा कि कहते हैं कि वरिष्ठ नागरिक हो जाते हैं 60 वर्ष की वय पर, तो समवेयर और द अदर इंटीग्रल ह्यूमैनिज्म हैज टच्ड अपॉन दैट मैजिक 60s. And now it is the time when the world is in yet another phase of turmoil, when this philosophical doctrine, this political philosophy, can really give a direction for sthirta, stability in today's era of VUCA, as we all call about it. And Deen Dayal ji started off, he did not give very fancy names. It was very simple, a humble karyakarta for that matter, having a deep patriotism, and always anchored into the Bharatiyata over there, the cultural and the civilizational identity of Sanatan Bharat. But what would be the face of the new Bharat after independence, and in which direction were we to advance? And these lectures were given at a time when India had faced a military debacle, the Chinese invasion of 1962, 3 years hence, when India was just to defeat even Pakistan in 1965. It was in the month of April when Deen Dayal ji presented these historical lectures. So, man does. Uh, uh, so, Deen Dayal ji says that man does not exist merely as an individual. And uh, so yesterday, means in lecture two, uh, Deen Dayal ji said that we considered man as an individual. There are different aspects of an individual personality, different levels of needs of an individual. Now, in order to develop complete personality, to satisfy the needs progressively, but simultaneously at all levels, certain specific kinds of efforts are needed. And these two were considered. He talked about the integral human from body, mind, intellect, and soul, and they have to go in parallel. Unlike the hierarchy of needs, which remains the Western paradigm, Deen Dayal ji said that it has to happens simultaneously at all levels. But man does not exist. Now he takes upon his argument, his proposition of integral humanism further, from an integral human being, that man does not exist merely as an individual. Man has to be integrated to the larger social structure, the national structures. The individual comprising of body, mind, intellect, and soul, as not limited to singular I, but is also inseparably related to the plural we. And that's where the preamble of our Indian constitution, we the people of India, that is Bharat. Therefore we must also think of the group or the society. It is a simple truth to treat society as a group of man. But how did society come into being? That's a central question Deen Dayalji asks. Many views have been put forward by philosophers and those propounded in the West, and on which the Western socio political structure is based. It can be broadly summarized as that society is a group of individuals who are brought into being by the individuals by an agreement among themselves. But Deen Dayalji differs with that man does not exist merely as an individual. This view is also known, the Western view is also known as the social contract theory. Individual is given greater importance in this view. If there are any differences in different Western views, these pertain only to the questions which are, if the individual produced a society, then in whom the residual power remains vested, in the society or in the individual. Only on this question there is a difference between the Western philosophers. And does the individual have the right to change the society? Can the society impose a variety or regulations on the individual and claim a right to the allegiance of the individual to itself? Or the individual is free as regards these questions? So the tussle between the individual versus society, Deen Dayalji goes on further. The truth is that the view that individuals have brought society into being is fundamentally incorrect. This is where the ideology starts differing. And it is true that the society is composed of a number of individuals, yet it is not made by people, nor does it come into being by mere coming together of a number of individuals. There's a controversy in the West on this very question, that some have opted for the society as supreme, and from this uh, conflict has arisen. In our view, in the Bharatiya view, society is self born. This is the proclamation, this is the assertion what Deen Dayalji makes from in the form of his doctrine of integral humanism. That, like an individual, society comes into existence in an organic way. People do not produce society. It is not a sort of a club or some joint stock company or a registered cooperative society. No. In reality, society is an entity with its own self, its own life. It is a sovereign being like an individual. It is an organic entity. So, this is the fundamental philosophical difference what Deen Dayalji presents, and then he builds upon his thesis further. So, we have not accepted the view that society is some arbitrary association. No, it has its own life. Society too has its body, mind, intellect, and soul. And Dingyalji says that some Western psychologists are beginning to accept this truth. McDougall has produced a new branch of psychology called the group mind. He has accepted that the group has its own mind, its own psychology, its own methods of thinking and action. A group has its feelings too. And these are not exactly similar to the individual feelings. Group feelings cannot be considered a merely arithmetic addition of individual feelings. No, group strength too is not a mere sum of individuals' strength. The intellect, the emotions, and energies, strength of a group are fundamentally different from those of an individual. Very, very starking point what Deen Dayal ji has made. Therefore, at times it is experienced that even weakling, despite his individual weak physique, turns out to be a heroic member of the society. And sometimes an individual may be ready to put up with an affront to his person, but is unwilling to tolerate an insult to his society. A person may be ready to forgive and forget a personal abuse to him, but the same man or a woman loses his or her temper if you abuse his or her society. So it is possible that a person who is of high character in his personal life is unscrupulous as a member of the society. It is possible. Similarly, an individual can be good in society but not so in his individual life. And this is a very, very, very important point. So, the unity, what we all call about it, the India has a very uncanny approach of presenting the first principles, philosophical precepts in such a very simplistic but a very substantive format as we are seeing it across. So Deendayal says that let me give you an illustration that once during a conversation between Shri Vinoba Bhaveji, we all know the Bhudan Andolan, the Gandhian saint as we call it, and the Sarasangh Chalak of Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh, Shri Guruji, question arose as to where the modes of thinking of Hindus and Muslims differ, a very, very pertinent aspect. Guruji said to Vinobaji that there are good and bad people in every society. There can be found honest and good people in Hindus as well as in Muslims. Similarly, rascals can be seen in both the societies. No particular society has a monopoly of goodness. But then, however, it is observed that Hindus, even if they are rascals in individual life, when they come together in a group, they always think of good things. On the other hand, when two Muslims come together, they propose and approve of things which they themselves, in their individual capacity, would not even think of. They start thinking in an altogether different way. And this is an everyday experience. Vinobaji admitted that there was truth in this observation, but then he had no reasons to explain this. So the group mind, the social mind, that's a contrast what was given over there. So, individual versus society, the theory continues that if we analyze this situation, we shall discover that the modes of thinking of an individual and of a society are always different. These two do not bear an arithmetic relation. If 1,000 good men gather together, it cannot be said for certain that they will think similarly of good things. An average Indian student, for example, at present is a mild and a meek young man compared to an average student of 20 years ago. Now, 1965, so he's giving an example of 1945. He is weaker and milder in every way. But when a score of such students get together, the situation becomes difficult. Then they indulge in all sorts of irresponsible actions. Thus, a single student appears disciplined, but a group of students become undisciplined. So Deen Dayal ji has advanced that individual and a social a group, they are two different things, and society, as per the Indic thought, has her own consciousness, has her own soul, mind, body, and soul. So we shall have to consider why this change comes about. This is known as the mob mentality, as distinct from individual mentality. This mob mentality is a small aspect of the mind. When a group of persons collect for a short time, the collective mentality obtained in that group is known as a mob mentality. But society and social mentality evolves over a much longer period. So a mob is different from a society which has its own characteristic out there. There is a thesis that when a group of people live together for a long time, by historical tradition and association, by continued intercourse, they begin to think similarly and have similar customs. It is true that some uniformity is brought about by staying together. Friendship arises between two persons of similar inclination. However, a nation or a society does not spring up from mere cohabitation. Yet another distinction what Dindayalji puts across. And then he comes that why mighty nations of antiquity perished. And I would like to invite Dr. Surbhi to take upon this slide and take the Vachan, because we consider in the Indic pantheon to read from the original source. Our intellectualism is a kind of a continuity, the way Dindayalji has encapsulated and assimilated the entire Bharatiya Gyan Parampara in these four short lectures. So we felt like to read out from the original text, the original words of Deen Dayal ji, just to commemorate this 60 momentous years of the advent of the political doctrine of integral humanism. Dr. Surbi, please.
So, very warm good afternoon and pranams to one and all. We take this on from here. Panditji says, why mighty nations of antiquity perished? It is known that some ancient nations disappeared. The ancient Greek nation came to end. Egyptian civilization similarly disappeared. Babylonian and Syrian civilizations are a matter of history. Cynthia's perished. Was there, Deen Dayalji goes on to say, was there ever a time when the citizens of those nations stopped living together? It was only the fact that there were wide differences among people that led to the downfall of these nations. The Greece in the past produced Alexander and Herodotus, Ulysses and Aristotle, Socrates and Plato, and the present day Greece is inhabited by people of the same hereditary stock. There was no interruption in their heredity because there never was a time when the whole of Greece was devoid of human population and when a new race inhabited that country. Such a thing never happened. Father and son tradition of old Greece was never interrupted. It is possible to trace the ancestry of present day Greeks to the old Greeks, some 250 to 500 generations back. Despite all, the old Greek nation is non existent. So, also, the old Egyptian nation is no longer there. New nations have arisen in those places. How did this happen? How did this happen? Dindyalji goes on to say this simple fact is indisputable that nations do not come into existence by a mere cohabitation. There was never a time in the lives of the citizens of these decadent nations when they stopped living in a group. On the other hand, Israeli Jews lived for centuries with other peoples scattered far and wide. Yet they did not get annihilated in the societies in which they lived because of cohabitation. It is clear, therefore, that the source of national feeling is not in staying on a particular piece of land, but is in something, etc.
So that's the secret Dindayal ji intends to unravel in his next slide, which is what is a nation? Uh, I think Dr. Surbi, please go on. Yeah.
That source is in the goal which is put before the people. When a group of persons live with a goal and ideal, a mission, and looks upon a particular place of land as motherland, this group constitutes a nation. If either of the two, an ideal and a motherland, is not there, then there is no nation. There is a self in the body, the essence of the individual. Upon the severance of its relation with the body, a person is said to die. Similarly, there is this idea, ideal, or fundamental principle of a nation, its soul. Although it is believed that man take birth again and again, yet the reborn person is a different individual. They are treated as two separate beings. The same soul leaves one body and enters another, but the previous and the latter are two different individuals. The end of a person is nothing but the departure of his soul from his body. The other components of the body also undergo change.
Yeah.
So then Dindayalji goes on to say, may I continue to take this
Yeah,
on?
please, please, Dr. Surbi. Yeah.
From childhood to old age, there is a drastic change. The biologists tell us that in course of a few years, every cell of our body is replaced by a new one. A variety of changes take place because the soul resides in the body without interruption. The body continues its existence. Such a relation is known as the law of identity. In logic, it is due to this identity that we admit the continued existence of any entity. In this connection, a nice illustration of a barber's razor is sometimes advanced. Once, while shaving, a barber, prided in his razor, being 60 years old. His father too had worked with the same razor. The customer was surprised, especially because the handle was quite shiny and new in appearance. Why? The handle is quite shiny. How have you preserved the brightness for 60 years? He asked. Barber too was amused with this. Is it possible to preserve the handle in a brand new appearance for 60 years? It has been replaced only 6 months ago, he replied naturally. The customer was curious and asked, and how old is the steel? 3 years was the reply. In brief, the handle was replaced. The steel was also replaced, but the razor remained old. Its identity was intact.
So just see the simple examples by which Deen Dayalji is explaining the very abstract concept of what is a nation. Dr. Surbi, please go on. Yeah.
So, Dindayalji goes on to say, similarly, a nation too has a soul. There is a technique named for it. In the principles and policies adopted by Jansangh, this name is mentioned. The word is Chiti.
Hmm.
According to MacDougall, it is the innate nature of a group. Every group of persons has an innate nature. Similarly, every society has an innate nature, which is inborn and is not the result of historical circumstances. A human being is born with a soul. Human personality, soul, and character are all distinct from one another. Personality results from a cumulative effect of all the actions, thoughts, and impressions of an individual. But soul is unaffected by this history. Similarly, national culture is continuously modified and enlarged by the historic reasons and circumstances. Culture does include all those things which, by the association, endeavors, and the history of the society, have come to be held up as good and commendable. But these are not added on to Chiti. Chiti is fundamental and is central to the nation from its very beginning. Dindayalji goes on to say, Chiti determines the direction in which the nation is to advance culturally. Whatever is in accordance with Chiti is included in culture.
And culture is the very nature of a nation for that matter. Dr. Surbi, yeah, the next level is Chiti, culture, and dharma. A very logical progression, a very baby steps so that even a beginner can appreciate the intertwined and intricate aspects of the fundamental principles of Sanatan Bharat. Dr. Surbi, please go on. Yeah.
By way of an illustration, consider the story of Mahabharata. Kauravas were defeated and Pandavas won. Why did we hold up as the conduct of Pandavas as dharma? Or why this battle was not considered just a battle for a kingdom? The praise for Yudhishthir and the dishonor heaped on Duryodhana are not a result of political causes. Krishna killed his uncle Kansa, the established king of the times. Instead of branding this as a revolt, we consider Krishna as an avatar of God and Kansa as an asura.
So this is the yardstick around which any action is considered to be dharmic or adharmic, and a different kind of a zero zero, as we can call it, depending on the civilizational chiti. The same act is considered to be dharmic in that context, and the other act is considered to be adharmic out there. Dr. Subi, please.
Rama, Panditji goes on to say, Rama was assisted in his invasion of Lanka by Vibhishana, brother of Ravana. Such conduct Such conduct of Vibhishana, instead of being branded as treason, is considered good and exemplary. He betrayed his brother and his king, even as Jaichand had one later on. He might be branded as a quisling, but Vibhishana is
Hmm.
not called quisling by anyone.
Hmm.
On the contrary, he is highly praised for his conduct, and Ravana actions are disapproved. Why so?
Hmm.
The reason behind this is not political. If there is any standard for determining the merits and demerits of particular action, it is this chiti. From nature, whatever is in accordance with chiti is approved and added on to culture. These things are to be cultivated. Whatever is against chiti is discarded as perversion. Undesirable is to be avoided. Chiti is the touchstone on which each action, each attitude is tested and determined to be acceptable or otherwise. Chiti is the soul of the nation. Pandit Dindayalji goes on to say, on the strength of this Chiti, a nation arises strong and virile, If it is this Chiti that is demonstrated in the actions of every great man of a nation.
So Chiti is that reference frame. It is that touchstone on which each action, each attitude is tested and determined to be acceptable or otherwise. And what is that Chiti of Bharat? That is what Deen Dayal ji is going to explain and enunciate in the next slides. Dr. Surbhi. So from left to right here.
Individual. An individual is also an instrument in bringing forth the soul of the nation, Chiti. Thus, apart from his own self, an individual also represents his nation. Not only that, but he also mans the various institutions that are created for the fulfillment of the national goal. Therefore, he represents these two. The groups larger than nation, such as mankind, are also represented by him. In short, an individual has a multitude of aspects, but they are not conflicting. There is cooperation, unity, and harmony in them. A system based on the recognition of this mutuality, complementary nature of the different ideals of mankind, their essential harmony, a system which devises laws, which removes the disharmony and enhances these mutual usefulness and cooperation alone can bring peace and happiness to mankind, can ensure steady development.
So, what is institutions? A means to fulfill national needs going forward. So, Deen Dayal ji says that as per the Darwin's theory, living beings develop various organs as per the requirements which are dedicated by the circumstances. And in our Shastras, it was stated slightly differently that the soul constructs using the strength of prana various organs as the need is felt for the purpose of continuing life. So the centrality of the Bharatiya thought is in the soul, that jiva tattva which creates and manifests the body around it. So just as the soul produces these different organs in the body, so also in the nation many different organs are produced as instruments to achieve national goals, like various departments in a factory, building, machinery, sales, production, maintenance, etc. Nations also produce different departments, which are called institutions. And these institutions are created to fulfill the needs of a nation. Family, castes, guilds, which are now known as trade unions, etc., are such institutions. Property, marriage are also institutions. Dindiyalji gives a historical reference that formerly there was no marriages. Later on, some rishis established the practice of solemnizing the marriages for that matter. So he produced the institution of marriage. Similarly, Gurukul and Rishikul were all institutions. In the same way, the state, the official state, is also an institution. The nation creates it. This is a very subtle distinction and a very substantive one, because it changes the entire precept of the interrelationships between the members of the state, the members of a nation, and so on and so forth. So Dindalji says that a lot of trouble in the West is due to the fact that they confused the state with the nation. Uh, they considered the state synonymous with the nation. Truly speaking, nation and a state are not the same. Nation is organic, nation has its own soul. The nation creates a state. A state is an institution of a nation. In our country, the state was produced as per social contract theory. We had a layer further deep there. Formerly, there was no king. Uh, Mahabharata describes that in Kriti Yuga, there was no state or king. Society was sustained and protected mutually by practicing dharma. And that was the Indic ideal, the Bharati ideal with which we had evolved for thousands and thousands of years. So later on, interruption and disorganization came into existence. Greed and anger dominated. Dharma was on the decline, and the rule, might is right, jiski lathi uski bhais, it prevailed. The rishis were perturbed over the developments. They all went to Brahma to seek counsel, and Brahma gave them a treatise on law and the functions of the state, which he had himself written. At the same time, he asked Manu. This is the Indic cosmology as to how the rule of the state came into being. He asked Manu to become the first king. Manu declined, saying that a king will have to punish other persons, put them in jail, and so on. He was not prepared to commit all these sins. Thereupon, Brahma said that your actions in the capacity of king will not constitute a sin as long as they are aimed at securing conditions under which the society can live peacefully and according to dharma. This will be your duty, your dharma. Not only that, but you will also have a share of the karma of your subjects, whereby you will gain dharma considerably if your subjects maintain conduct according to dharma. So, although it is not explicitly stated here, but I believe, says the Indialji, that if the society under any king committed a sin, a part of that too must automatically go to the account of the king. So, both punya and papa, both the king has to get a share of it, of his subjects. It is not proper if only good things are shared by the king and not the bad ones. Both must be shared in the same proportion. That is the dharmic sense, the balanced sense over there. And thus, the state came into existence as a contract. And this contract theory can be applied to the state, but not to the nation. That is a very, very subtle but substantive distinction which differentiates Bharat from the other Paschatya paramparas. In the West, it was exactly opposite. Society as a nation, according to them, was a contract, but the king claimed a divine right and proclaimed himself the sole uh, representative of God. And Deen Dayalji says, this is wrong. This is wrong. It was never, the king was not above everyone. He explains it very spectacular. He doesn't leave any aspect for second guessing or speculation. He presents it very, very meticulously. So, in our country, Bharat, the king may have been first recognized in antiquity, but the society as a nation is considered self born. State is only an institution. Similarly, other institutions like the state are created from time to time as the need is felt. Every individual is a limb of one or more of these institutions. A person is a member of his family as well as community. He may also be a member of some association of his fellow professionals if he pursues a profession. Above all, he is a member of the nation and society. If we consider even larger spheres, he is a member of the whole mankind and then the entire universe. Truly speaking, an individual is not merely a single entity but a plural entity. He is a part of not just one but a member of many institutions. He lives a variety of life. So, the most important aspect is that despite his multiple personality, he can and should behave in a way which does not bring different aspects of his life into mutual conflict. And this is the core aspect of synthesizing it all in a seamless fashion, which creates this doctrine of integral humanism, that despite an individual having multiple personalities, everything is in harmony. Everything, that is what dharma, that is what the dharmic order Deen Dayalji goes on to explain. but which is mutually sustaining, complementary and unifying. भारत का जो समत्वम है, the synthesizing nature, the harmonious nature, that constitutes that integral whole. And this quality, Dindalji says, asserts it is inherently in man. Conflict is not something which is inherently in man. Harmony is out there, and for that, the larger structures have to be created, or they have to be accepted in that fashion. A person who uses this quality properly becomes happy, and on the other hand, one who does not do so reaps unhappiness. Such a person will not have balanced development in the life. Uh, so, uh, Going on further on the count of institutions, Deendayalji gives an illustration, and I would invite Dr. Surbhi because it's a larger social construct to do the vachan of this slide. Yeah.
So Dindayalji goes on to say that institution, a means to fulfill national needs, as an illustration, a man is son of his father, husband of his wife, brother of his sister, and father of his son. A single individual is a father and is also a son. He is brother and also husband. He has to maintain all these relations with intelligence, understanding, and tact. Where a person fails to do so, there is conflict.
Hmm.
If he sides with one party, the other feels wronged. The conflicts between his wife and his sister, his wife and mother, result from his inability to behave properly. Thereupon, some of his relations are strained. He is pained because of his duties towards his mother and towards his wife clash. When he can resolve this conflict and fulfill all his obligations properly, it can be said that his development will be integrated.
Hmm. So, moving forward, society and individuals, they are not conflicting in nature, and that's where Deen Dayalji builds upon it further. So, Dr. Surbhi.
We do not accept the view that there is any permanent, inevitable conflict among the multifarious personality of an individual and different institutions of the society. If a conflict does exist, it is a sign of decadence, perversion, and not of nature or culture. The error in Western thinking lies in that some people they believe that human progress is a result of this fundamental conflict. Therefore, they consider the conflict between the individual and the state as a natural occurrence. On the same basis, they also theorized on the class conflict. Classes do exist in a society. Here too, there were castes. But we had never accepted conflict between one caste and another as fundamental concept behind it. In our concept of four castes, they are thought of as analogous to the different limbs of Virat Purusha. It was suggested that from the head of the Virat Purusha, Brahmins were created, Kshatriyas from hands, Vaishyas, Vaishyas from his abdomen, and Shudras from legs. If we analyze this concept, we are faced with the question whether they can arise any conflict among the head, arms, stomach, and legs of the same Virat Purusha. If conflict is fundamental, the body cannot be maintained. There cannot be any conflict in the different parts of the same body. On the contrary, one man prevails. These limbs are not only complementary to one another, but even further, there is individual unity. There is a complete identity of interest, identity of belonging. The origin of the caste system was on the above basis. Now, if this idea is not kept alive, the castes, instead of being complementary, can produce conflict. But then this is distortion. Then this is distortion. It is not a systematic arrangement, rather, it is absence of any plan, any arrangement. This is indeed the present condition of our society.
So, in a way or the other, when the fourth industrial revolution is looming large and the convergence of various technological platforms is taking place, perhaps these very abstractions, which were so very usual, so very normal in the Bharatiya Parampara, I think even the Westerners are trying to see the convergence of I would say, the social structures, the larger structures over there. And that's what makes this doctrine of integral humanism so very relevant in contemporary times when the word is again looming large on the cusp of yet another asthirta because of this fragmented view of things. So, moving forward, Dr. Surbi, please continue.
So, Panditji goes on to say this process of deterioration can set in the various institutions of a society due to variety of reasons. If the soul of the society weakens, then all the different limbs of the society will grow feeble and ineffective. Any particular institution may be tendered useless or even harmful, besides the need and the usefulness of any particular institution may change with time, place, and circumstances. While examining the present state of an institution, we ought at the same time to think of what it should be like. Mutual complementary, and a sense of unity alone can be the standards of proper conduct. Family, community, trade union, Gram Panchayat, Janapad, state, and such other institutions are various limbs of the nation and even of mankind. They are interdependent, initially complementary. There should be a sense of unity through all of them. For this very reason, there should be a tendency towards mutual accommodation in them instead of conflict or opposition.
So, this mutual accommodation comes only when these very organic precepts are understood, accepted, and put into action. And that's what the doctrine of integral humanism posits for the future of Bharat. But what would be the face of the new Bharat after independence? In which direction were we to advance? That's what the Indialji has been asking this question again and again and giving answers to it as well. So, moving on, Dr. Subi, continue, please. Yeah.
So Panditji goes on to say, state is one of the several institutions, an important one, but it is not above all other. One of the major reasons for the problems of the present day world is that almost everyone thinks of the state to be synonymous with the society. At least in practice, they consider the state as the sole representative of the society. Other institutions declined have declined in their effectiveness while the state has become dominant to such an extent that all the powers are gradually being centralized in the state. We had not considered the state to be the sole representative of the nation. Our national life continued uninterruptedly even after the state went in the hands of the foreigners.
So here the difference between the nation and the state, the nation and the society and the state comes very, very clear to all of us. Moving forward, the Persian nation came to an end with their loss of independence. In our country, there were foreign rulers now and then in various parts of the country. At sometimes the Pathans seized the throne of Delhi, and then the Turks, the Mughals, and the British to establish their rule. Despite all this, our national life went on because the state was not its center. If we had considered state as the center, we would have been finished as a nation long time ago. In some tale for children, it is described that an evil spirit resided in some parrot, and to kill the evil spirit, one had to kill that parrot. So, the soul of Bharatiya Rashtra, the nation, was in its society. It was different from a state. We had this understanding, and today it is also the 24th of April, is also commemorated as the Indian National Day for the Panchayati Raj. And that's what Deen Dayal ji would be touching upon it also, that how our Panchayati Raj institutions, they were so strong that any upheaval at the imperial level, the Delhi Darbar, it did not affect the life in the 6 lakh odd villages, the Gram Panchayats, the 2.5 lakh Gram Panchayats we have today. Uh, they did not affect the life at the last mile. But times are changing, and the integration of the state to the last grassroots has become so very intense over a period of time. So those nations whose life centered in the state were finished with the end of the state. On the other hand, where a state was not believed central to its life, the nation survived the transfer of the political power. And but this had its side effects also. So Deen Dayal ji, again, the balance. You have to always look to reality in an integrated fashion. If you are propounding a doctrine which is as ephemeral as integral humanism, each and every precept which you are propounding need to pass through that test of integral part. If there is a pros of it also, so the cons, Deen Dayal ji says that Dr. Ambedkar had said that our Gram Panchayats were so strong that we somehow neglected the throne of Delhi. The way we were so focused on the Purushartha of moksha, that somewhere or the other we forgot about Artha, which is the mool of Dharma. So somewhere or the other, the integral quartet, the quad of Purusharthas, what Deen Dayal ji in lecture 2 explained so very beautifully. I think that should be devoured over and over again. So we did not remain alert as regards the state as much as we ought to have done, thinking that nation's life did not depend on the state. Now, this folly Deen Dayal ji forewarns against. We have to have a balance. The society has to also conduct, but then state is also important. We forgot that though it may not be central, the state is definitely an important institution serving some needs of the nation, just as a limb of the body. For example, the way we were attacked, our citizens were attacked in Pahalgaon. So the Indian state has got alerted, and it is responding to the external aggressors. So that is where the collective power of the state organization is so very relevant. So it is possible to pluck a hair without much harm, but along with the hair, if some skin is also removed and a little further, if the head too is cut off, then there will be a great loss for the body. Therefore, the body must be protected as well. Although the various limbs of the body are not absolutely indispensable, yet each of them serves an important person. So, from the same standpoint, state too should have been deemed important in the life of a nation. There were persons who attended to this aspect, and it was for this reason that the great teacher of Shivaji, Samarth Guru Ramdas Swami, directed him to establish his kingdom. Dharma wields its own power. Dharma is important in life, no doubt about it. Sri Ramdas ji would have as well preached Shivaji to become a mendicant and spread dharma, following his own example. But on the contrary, he is inspired Shivaji to extend his rule because state too is an important institution of the society, of the Rashtra. However, to consider something important is different from saying that it is supreme. That's where the integral aspect comes into play, where extreme positions are avoided either on this side or on this side. So, state is important, but it is not supreme. That is the balance what Deen Dayal ji is trying to present all through his integral humanism discourse. The state is not supreme. It is important, but it is not supreme. The question then arises is that if the state is not of fundamental importance, what is? That is absolutely important. And Deen Dayal ji now comes to a very, very fundamental question. He considers this, that if the state is not of fundamental importance, what is? That is absolutely important. So he unravels, unveils dharma. It is dharma which sustains the society. We shall have to examine the reasons why the state was established. No one will dispute that the state must have some specific aim, some ideal. The state has to have a specific aim and a ideal. Then this aim or ideal must be considered of highest importance rather than the state which is created to fulfill this ideal. A watchman is not deemed greater than the treasure is supposed to protect, nor he is a treasure by himself. The state is brought into existence to protect the nation, produce and maintain conditions in which the ideals of the nation can be translated into reality. So, state is an instrument. It is not a sadhya. It is a sadhan. It is not a sadhya in itself, as somewhere the Western society is thought out it to be. So, the ideals of the nation constitute the chiti. As we had mentioned, that the ideals for nation. What are the national ideals? That constitutes the national chiti, which is analogous to the soul of an individual. It requires some effort to comprehend Chiti. So, what is the Chiti of Bharatiya Rashtra? The laws that help manifest and maintain Chiti of a nation are termed Dharma of that nation. The laws that help manifest and maintain the Chiti of a nation are termed Dharma for that nation. Hence, it is this Dharma that is supreme. Dharma is the repository of nation's soul. If dharma is destroyed, the nation perishes. Anyone who abandons dharma betrays the nation. So, dharma encapsulates the national chiti beautifully. Dharma sustains the society, dharma sustains the rashtra. We will just move on to see it further. So, dharma is not confined to temples or mosques. Worship of God is only a very small part of dharma. Dharma is much, much wider. In the past, temples have served as an effective medium to educate people in their dharma. However, just as schools themselves do not constitute knowledge, so also temples do not constitute dharma. They were the centers of learning, they were the centers of knowledge, but they were not knowledge in themselves. This distinction needs to be seen very, very closely. And Deen Dayal ji, as we have seen, while anchored into the Sanatani Bharatiya Parampara, he was not dogmatic. He has always said that we have moved on in the checkered history. Time has moved on, and we have not remained docile or inactive in this long, harrowed history. We had an active role to play, and desirability is something different, but it is impossible to turn back the flow of time. So, child may attend school regularly and yet may remain uneducated. So, also it is possible that a person may visit temple or mosque without break, and yet he may not know his dharma. To attend temple or mosque constitutes a very small part of religion, sect, creed, but not necessarily dharma. Many misconceptions that originated from faulty English translations include this most harmful confusion of dharma with religion. So this is what Deen Dayal ji, the next section, very elaborate slides on this very aspect. I would say the 30 odd slides now are all about that dharma and religion are different. I would request Dr. Surbi to take on this very involved and interspersed, intertwined commentary that dharma and religion are different. Very many aspects Deen Dayal ji opens up, explains it, enunciates in his own characteristic style. Dr. Surbi.
On the one hand, we use the word religion as synonymous with dharma. And on the other hand, increasing ignorance, neglect of our society and dharma, and greater acceptance of European life became the outstanding features of our education. As a result of all the characteristics of a narrow religion, especially as practiced in the West, were attributed automatically to the concept of dharma also. Since in the West, injustice, atrocities were perpetrated, bitter conflicts and battles were fought in the name of religion, all these were in block listed on the debit side of dharma also. We felt that in the name of dharma also battles were fought. However, battles of religion and battles of dharma are two different things. Religion means a creed or a sect. It does not mean dharma. Panditji goes on to say dharma is very wide concept. It is concerned with all aspects of life. It sustains the society. Even further, it sustains the whole world. That which sustains is dharma. The fundamental principles of dharma are eternal and universal. Yet, their implementation may differ according to time, place, and circumstances. So, in this slide, Dindayalji is saying dharma and religion are different, and their implementation may differ according to time, place, and circumstances. It is a fact that a human being requires food for maintaining his body. However, what a particular person should eat in how much quantity at what intervals is all decided according to circumstances. It is possible at times that even fasting is advisable. If a typhoid patient is given normal food, the consequences may be disastrous. For such a person, keeping away from food is necessary. Similarly, the principles of dharma have to be adapted to changing times and pace. Some rules are temporary, others are valid for longer periods. There are some rules regulating our conduct at this meeting. One of the rules is that I speak and you listen with attention. If in contravention of this rule, you start conversing with one another or addressing the gathering at the same time, then there will be disorder. Our work will not progress. The meeting will not be
Mhm.
sustained.
So just see that such an abstruse, such a very, uh, I would say, very subtle concept. He just brings it to the meeting itself. That there is a dharma of a meeting, what kind of rules you have to fulfill, and then very jocularly he moves on. Dr. Subi, please continue. Yeah.
It can be said that you have not observed your dharma. Thus, it is our dharma that we observed your dharma. Thus, it is our dharma that we observed the rules by which the meeting proceeds smoothly. But this rule is applicable only as long as this meeting lasts. If after the meeting is over and even when you reach home, you continue to observe this rule and do not speak, a different problem will arise. Your family might have to call in a doctor. At home, the rule suitable there will have to be observed.
So time, place, and circumstances. Very simply, yeah.
The complete treatise on the rules in general and their philosophical basis is the meaning of dharma. These rules cannot be arbitrary.
Yeah.
They should be such as to sustain and further existence and progress of the entity which they serve. At the same time, they should be in agreement with and supplementary to the larger framework of dharma of which they form a part.
So the
For
larger
instance,
cosmic creation, it's kind of a construct of a Lego, something here, something there. It's all building up into a larger cosmic reality, which is in symphony, which is in harmony, which is for the larger good, the greater good. Dharma is not for annihilation. It is for sustenance. It is for sthirta. The goal is never nefarious. Even, and that's why we see that even the warmongers under quotes, they are considered to be establishing the law of dharma. Shri Krishna, he ensued that war on Kurukshetra just to establish dharma, even if it meant the larger annihilation on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. So, Dr. Subi, please move
for
on.
instance, for instance, when we form a registered society, we have the right to frame the rules and regulations. But these cannot be contradictory to the constitution of the society. The constitution itself cannot violate the society's registration act. The act has to be within the provision of the constitution of the country. In other words, the constitution of the country is a fundamental document which governs the formulation of all acts in the country. In Germany, the constitution is known as the basic law. There should be, is the constitution too not subject to some principles of more fundamental nature?
Or is it a product of any arbitrary decisions of the Constituent Assembly? On a serious consideration, it will be clear that even the Constitution has to follow certain basic principles of nature. Constitution is for sustaining the nation. It's again a sadhan, not the sadhin itself, as somewhat it is being aired in the contemporary political discourse for that matter. If instead it is an instrumental in its deterioration, then it must be pronounced improper. So the constitution is for sustaining the nation. The purpose is very, 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 very clear. It must be amended. The amendment is also not solely dependent on the majority opinion. Nowadays, the majority is much talked about. Is the majority capable of doing anything and everything? Is the action of the majority always just and proper? Deen Dayal ji says unequivocally, no. In the West, the king used to be the sovereign. Thereafter, when royalty was deprived of its so called divine rights, sovereignty was proclaimed to be with the people. Here in our country, neither the kings, nor the people, nor the parliament have had absolute sovereignty. A very, very fundamental precept Deen Dayal ji proclaims, and that is what makes integral humanism a really transformational philosophy of Sanatan Bharat. Parliament cannot legislate arbitrarily. It is said about the British Parliament that it is sovereign and can do anything, but this is not the concept, this is not the precept which has been adapted or adopted in India. So they say that British Parliament can do everything except making a woman a man and vice versa. The gender change, I think the technology, the medical science has advanced after that period of time, which is still doing this. But is it possible for the parliament to legislate that every Englishman must walk on his head? It is not possible. Can they pass an act that everyone in England must present himself before the local authority once every day? They cannot. England has no written constitution. They regard tradition highly, but their traditions too have undergone change. What is the basis for making changes in their tradition? Whichever tradition proved an obstacle in the progress of England was discarded. Those which were helpful in the progress were consolidated. Dindalji gives a very parallel example that even the traditions they have to fulfill the larger cause, the higher cause, the progress, the welfare. So the traditions are respected everywhere, just as in England. We have written constitution, but even these written constitutions cannot go contrary to the traditions of this country. So both balancing that traditions cannot uh, go against the natural flow. So similarly, the written constitutions also cannot go contrary to the traditions of the country. In as much as it does go contrary to our traditions, it is not fulfilling dharma. So that constitution which sustains the nation is in tune with dharma, the larger goal. So dharma sustains the nation. Hence, we have always given primarily importance to dharma, which is considered sovereign. So, what is sovereign? It is dharma. All other entities, institutions, or authorities derive their power from dharma and are actually subordinate to it. If we examine our constitution from the point of view of the growth of the nation, we find that our constitution needs amendment. Now, Dindayalji presents his case for amending the constitution. We are one nation, one society. Ek Bharat, Shrestha Bharat. That is why we did not entertain any special rights on the basis of language, province, caste, religion, etc., but gave everyone equal citizenship. That's the unique characteristic of India. There are separate states. There is no separate citizenship of a state and of union. We are all citizens of Bharat. By the same token, we have denied the right to secede to individual states. Not only that, the power to demarcate the boundaries of state and to choose their names is vested in the parliament and not in assemblies. The state assemblies don't have that power. This is as it should be, in tune with the nationalism and tradition of Bharat. However, despite all this, we made our constitution federal, whereby what we have adopted in practice, we have actually rejected in principle. In a federation, constituent units have their own sovereignty. These voluntarily relinquish their sovereignty to the federation by an agreement. It may be that they surrender all their rights and thereby the center requires sovereignty. But these powers are given to the union and it has no power of its own. And very subtle distinction, Dindayalji, again, the constitutional debate, whether India is, as per the constitutional principle, we will just see it across. Thus, the federal constitution considers the individual states as fundamental power and the center as merely a federation of states. But Dindayalji says that this is contrary to the truth in the case of Bharat. It runs counter to the unity and indivisibility of Bharat. There is no recognition of the idea of Bharat Mata in such a federal constitution, our sacred motherland, as enshrined in the hearts of our people. So that's where he says that we have adopted the principle of Ek Bharat Shrestha Bharat in practice, but we have rejected in principle somewhere or the other because of the early constitutional assembly influences from the other westernized nations for that matter. So, according to the first paragraph of the Constitution, India, that is Bharat, will be a federation of a state, that is Bihar Mata, Bang Mata, Punjab Mata, Kannada Mata, Tamil Mata, all put together make Bharat Mata. This Dindayalji says is ridiculous. This is ridiculous and that needs to be challenged even in as a matter of principle, a constitutional principle. So we have thought of the provinces as limbs of Bharat Mata and not as individual mothers. It's an integrated whole. Therefore, our constitution should be unitary instead of federal. But a unitary state, then Deen Dayal ji explains in the very next breath, in the next very aspect, that a unitary state does not mean the concentration of all powers in the center. Just as the head of the family does not have all the powers with him, even though all the transactions are carried out in his name. Others also share the executive power. In our body also, does the soul possess all powers? Thus, in a unitary state does not mean a highly autocratic center, nor does it entail the elimination of provinces. No, the provinces will have various executive powers. Even the various entities below the provincial level, such as the Janapadas, will also have suitable powers. The panchayats, Deen Dayal ji invokes that on 24th of April, when the 72nd and 73rd constitutional amendments, at that time they were done at a much later date. So the panchayats too should have powers. Traditionally, the panchayats had a very important position. Nobody could dissolve panchayats. Today, however, our constitution does not have any place for these panchayats. It has been amended to a great extent later on, after 1965. There are no powers to these panchayats in their own right. They exist as at the mercy of the states only as delegated authorities. It is necessary that their powers be considered fundamental. In this way, the decentralization of power will be accomplished. The authority will be distributed to the lowest level and will be fully decentralized. At the same time, all these entities of power will be centered around the unitary state. And this arrangement will embody dharma. So, somewhere or the other, we still continue with the colonial aberration, which our Constituent Assembly could not mitigate, because those were distressful times and the different interests, the different aspects had to be accommodated. And perhaps we hope and believe that by the time, long before integral humanism touches uh, Shatak, the 100 years, long before, I think this vision of having a unitary Bharat, integral Bharat, can be achieved even as a matter of principle. So, if we carry this concept of dharma even further, not only the state and the nation, but the nature of the entire mankind would have to be considered. In other words, uh, the constitution uh, of a nation cannot be contrary to the natural law. There are a number of norms of behavior which are not found in any statute book, yet they do exist. Dr. Surbi, can you please take it up? Yeah.
So at times, they are even stronger and more binding than any statutory law. The precept that one should respect one's parents is not written in any law. The present day governments, which are turning out variety of laws day in and day out, have not passed a law to this effect. Still, people respect their parents. Those who do not are criticized. If tomorrow there arises a discussion, even in a court, it will generally be accepted. It would be generally accepted that as long as a person does not attain majority, he should accept his parents' decisions and should respect them. So, I mean, this is in a sense explaining that a law is not written where we say that we should respect one's our parents.
Yeah, yeah.
Next slide, please. Yes.
So, yeah.
Thus, the fundamental law of human nature as the standard for deciding the propriety of behavior in various situations. We have termed this very law as dharma. The nearest equivalent English term for dharma can be innate law, which, however, does not express the full meaning of dharma. Since dharma is supreme, our ideal of the state has been Dharma Rajya. The king is supposed to protect dharma. In older times, at the coronation ceremony, the king used to recite three times, "There is no authority which can punish me." Similar claim was made by kings in the Western countries. That is, it was said king can do no wrong, and hence there too nobody could punish the king. Upon this, the prophet used to strike the king on his back with a staff, saying,
No, you are subject to the rule of dharma. You are not sovereign. And in fact, we can see that the new parliament building, what just got constructed, we have seen the establishment of a dharma dand, the Sengol. It is a kind of a manifestation of that prophet, that dharma dand, which is always over and above the Raj dand. In some way or the other, it has been established, figuratively at least, that there is no sovereign, the sovereign is dharma.
the king used to run around the sacred fire, and the prophet would follow him, striking him with the staff. Thus, after completing 3 rounds, the ceremony would come to an end, and thereby the king was unambiguously told that he was not an unpunishable sovereign. Dharma was above him, that even he was subject to dharma. Can the people do whatever they please? It may be contended that democracy means just that. The people can do what they please. But in our country, even people wish they are not free to act contrary to dharma. To act contrary to dharma.
So the people's will is also not supreme. So once a priest was asked that if the God is omnipotent, can he act contrary to dharma? If he does, then he is not omnipotent. This was a dilemma. So, can God practice adharma, or is lie not omnipotent? Actually, God cannot act contrary to dharma. That is the intertwined and an integral precept of Sanatan Bharat, that even the gods are not allowed to go out of dharma.
If he does, then he is not omnipotent. Adharma is a characteristic of weakness, not of strength. If the fire, instead of emitting heat, dies out, it is no longer strong. Strength lies not in unrestrained behavior, but in well regulated action. Therefore, God, who is omnipotent, is also self regulated and consequently fully in tune with dharma. God descends in human body to destroy adharma and re-establish dharma, not to act on passing whims and fancies. Hence, even God can do everything but cannot act contrary to dharma. But for the risk of being misunderstood, one can say that dharma is even greater than God. The universe is sustained because he acts according to dharma. The king was supposed to be a symbol of Vishnu in as much as he was the chief protector of Dharma Rajya.
So it's not the individual, it is the dharma. It is not even the king, not even the god. It is the dharma which has been posited to be supreme in the Bharatiya parampara, the integral humanism what Deen Dayal ji is talking about.
So, Dharma Rajya does not mean a theocratic state.
Now, this is yet another distinction, a very, very seminal distinction, I think, which needs to be devoured over and over again for the various questions which are presented out over there. So, let us be very, very clear on this point, that where a particular sect and its prophet or a guru rule supreme, that is a theocratic state. All the rights are enjoyed by the followers of this particular sect, but then that would become adharma. Others either cannot live in that country or at best enjoy a slave like secondary citizens status. Holy Roman Empire had this basis. The same concept was existing behind Khilafat. The Muslim kings world over used to rule in the name of Khalifa. And after the First World War, this came to an end. Now efforts are afoot to revive it. Pakistani is the most recent theocratic state, and their general, somewhere his speech that he said that the only state in the modern times which has got founded on the basis of Kalma, that perhaps instigated the terrorist to undertake that dastardly attack in Pahalgaon. So I think the same fault line continues what Deen Dayal ji is mentioning, that Pakistan, the most recent theocratic state, they call themselves as an Islamic state. There, apart from Muslims, all the rest are second class citizens. And apart from this difference, there is no other sign of Islam in Pakistan's administration. A very stark reality Deen Dayal ji has just presented in a very, very simple fashion. So Quran, Masjid, Roza, Eid, Namaz, etc. are same both in Bharat as well as in Pakistan. There is no need to the state and religion. By such a tie-up, there is no increase in an individual's capacity to worship God. The only result is that the state slips in its duty. And this does not happen in a dharma rajya. Rather, there is freedom to worship according to one's religion. In a theocratic state, one religion has all the rights and disadvantages and advantages, and there are direct or indirect restrictions on all other religions. Dharma rajya accepts the importance of religion in the peace, happiness, and progress of an individual. Therefore, the state has the responsibility to maintain an atmosphere in which every individual can follow the religion of his choice and live in peace. The freedom has its inherent limits. I have the freedom to swing my hand, but as soon as there is a conflict between my hand and someone else's nose, my freedom has to be restricted. I have no freedom to swing my hand so as to hit another person's nose. So a reasonable restriction, Deen Dayal ji presents it so very unequivocally out here. So, where the other person's freedom is likely to be encroached upon, my freedom ends. And the freedom of both parties has to be ensured, and that's what integral humanism is all about. Similarly, every religion has the freedom to exist. But this freedom extends only as far as it does not riot, encroach upon the religion of others. If such encroachment is carried on, it will have to be condemned as misuse of the freedom and will have to be ended. Such limitations will be required in all aspects of life. So, Dharma Rajya, it ensures religious freedom and is not a theocratic state. Uh, then the Indiaji again, then there is the entire precept of a secular state, and he explains it in the very next opportunity. Nowadays, the word secular state is being used as opposed to a theocratic state. The adoption of this work is mere imitation of the Western thought pattern. We had no need to import it. We called it a secular state to contrast it with Pakistan, the entire problem which we had. And there is some misunderstanding arising out of it. This religion was equated with dharma, and then secular state was meant to be a state without dharma. Some said that ours is a state without dharma, whereas others, trying to find a better sounding different word, called it a dharma nirapeksha, indifferent to dharma state. But all these words are fundamentally erroneous. For a state can neither be without dharma nor can it be indifferent to dharma, just as fire cannot be without heat. So, very fundamental aspect the Indiaji has presented, explained, I think, the entire political discourse in the contemporary times when this entire adoption of the term secularism, it has perverted the Indian national consciousness. So if the fire loses heat, it does not remain fire any longer. State which exists fundamentally to maintain dharma, to maintain law and order, can neither be nidharma nor dharma niripeksha. If it is nidharma, it will be lawless state, and where there is lawlessness, where is the question of the existence of any state? So, in other words, dharma and state are uh, contra, self contradictory. State can only be dharma rajya, the rule of dharma, nothing else. Any other definition will conflict with the reason of its very existence. In a Dharma Rajya, the state is not absolutely powerful. It is subject to Dharma. We have always vested sovereignty in Dharma. Presently, there has arisen a controversy. Parliament is supreme or the Supreme Court is supreme. Legislature is higher or judiciary is higher. And I think some of the latest pronouncements which are out there, this entire debate 60 years hence is still in the contemporary times, it is looming large. So, Dr. Surbi, if you can continue. Yeah.
So Dindayalji goes on to say, this quarrel is like a quarrel whether left hand is more important or right hand. Both are limbs of the state, legislature as well as judiciary. Both have distinct functions to perform in their individual sphere. Each is supreme. To consider either one above the other would be mistake. Yet the legislators say we are higher. On the other hand, members of the judiciary assert that they have a higher authority since they interpret the laws which the legislature makes. The legislature claims to have given powers to the judiciary. If necessary, the legislature can change the constitution. Now, hence, it claims sovereignty. Since powers are bestowed by constitution, they're talking of amendment to the constitution. But Dindayalji says, goes on to say, I believe that even if by a majority the constitution is amended, it will be against dharma. In reality, both the legislature and the judiciary are on an equal plane. Equal plane. Neither the legislature is higher nor the judiciary.
So, again, a very, very objective, integral view anchored into Dharma, what Deen Dayalji is propounding has been enunciated. So dharma is higher than both the legislature and the judiciary. The legislature will have to act according to dharma, and the judiciary will have to act according to dharma. Dharma will specify limits of both. So the legislature, the judiciary, or the people, none of these are supreme. Some will say, why? People are sovereign, they elect. But even the people are not sovereign because people too have no right to act against dharma. If an elected government allows people to go against dharma and does not punish, then that government is in reality a government of thieves. Even the general will, even the general will cannot go against dharma. Imagine the situation if by some maneuvering thieves gain a majority in the government and send one of their ranks as an executive. What will be the duty of the minority if the majority is of thieves and elects a thief to rule? The duty clearly will be to remove the representative elected by the majority. During the Second World War, then Hitler attacked France. The French army could not stall the onward march of the Nazi troops. The then Prime Minister of France, Marshal Pétain, decided to surrender. The French public supported the decision, but de Gaulle escaped to London, where he declared that he did not accept the surrender. France is independent and will remain so. From London, he formed a government of France in exile and eventually liberated France. So now, if the majority rule is to be considered supreme, then de Gaulle's action will have to be condemned. He had no right to fight in the name of independence. De Gaulle derived his right from the fact that the French nation was above the majority public opinion. The national dharma is above all. So, independence is dharma of every nation. To preserve independence and to strive for regaining it when lost is the duty of every citizen. Even in our country, a majority had not risen against the Britishers. Only a few had. Some revolutionary arose, some brave people arose and fought. Lokmanya declared, "Freedom is my birthright." He did not declare this birthright with the support of a majority or by a referendum from the public. Nowadays, people advocate that the merger of Goa should be decided by referendum, that there should be plebiscite in Kashmir, etc. etc. This is wrong, so very wrong. National unity is our dharma. Decisions concerning this cannot be made by plebiscite. This type of a decision has already been taken by the nature. Elections and majority can decide as to who will form the government. The truth, the truth cannot be decided by the majority. What the government will be decided by dharma. So very, very powerful enunciation the Indialji makes out here. You all know that in the USA, when they swear by democracy at one time, Lincoln did not accept the wrong public opinion. On the question of the abolition of slavery, when the southern states declared their intention to secede, Lincoln stood firm and told them, "You have no right to secede even in a democracy." He fought against this and did not allow them to secede, nor did he tolerate uh, slavery. He did not show readiness for a compromise whereby there may continue partial slavery to accommodate southern states. It was a matter of dharma, it was a matter of principle. He did not accept the principle of meeting halfway. He categorically declared that the system of slavery was against tradition, the dharma, the principle which was at the basis of the American nation. Therefore, the system of slavery had to be abolished. When the Southerners decided to secede, he told them, "You cannot secede." On this point, there was a civil war, and Lincoln did not compromise with Adharma. So, here in our country, the situation in this regard is very much like the old Hindu marriages where a married couple could not divorce even if both the parties wished. The principle was that their behavior should be regulated not by their sweet will but by dharma. The same is the case with the nation. If the 4 million people of Kashmir say that they want to secede, if the people of Goa say that they want to secede, some say they want the Portuguese to return, all this is against dharma. Of the 45 million people of India, even if the 449,999,999 opt for something which is against dharma, even then this does not become the truth. That is the power of dharma. On the other hand, even if a person stands for something which is according to dharma, that constitutes truth because truth resides with dharma. It is the duty of this one person that he treads the path of truth and change people. It is from this basis that a person derives the right to proceed according to dharma. So, this is perhaps the last slide of this majestic lecture 3, delivered exactly 6 decades earlier by the legendary Pandit Deen Upadhyay ji. And I would request Dr. Surbhi to do the honors of narrating it for posterity, just to commemorate this legendary enunciation of Pandit Deen Upadhyay ji.
So, in this classical grandeur style, which Panditji explains, Deen Dayal ji says that let us understand very clearly that dharma is not necessarily with the majority or with the people. Dharma is eternal. Therefore, in the definition of democracy, to say that it is a government of the people, it is not enough. It has to be for the good of the people. What constitutes the good of the people? Dharma alone can decide. Therefore, a democratic government, Janarajya, must also be rooted in Dharma, that is a Dharma Rajya. In the definition of democracy, that is a government of the people, by the people, and for the people, of stands for independence, by stands for democracy, and for indicates Dharma. Therefore, the true democracy is only where there is freedom as well as dharma encompasses all these concepts.
So we are allowed to use the play of the words. Perhaps Deen Dayal ji stood for a dharmacracy, as opposed to democracy alone. So a dharmacracy is something what Deen Dayal ji posited, and in the next lecture, the ultimate lecture, the final lecture 4, we would be delivering it tomorrow. We would be reading it out, and like the way we read out the original copy of the Constitution, reading word by word, phrase by phrase, sentence by sentence, paragraph by paragraph of such a seminal body of distilled civilizational wisdom, I think is of paramount importance to remove the cobwebs of confusion, to really let the civilizational chiti of Sanatan Bharat, I would say, have its prakash over all of us. And we are so very fortunate to have savants like Panditji, who really established the Sanatani Bharatiya principle in such a progressive, in such an all encompassing fashion, in such a balanced fashion for that matter. We are so very fortunate to have got this opportunity to do these renditions of Panditji's seminal lectures. And as a part of this endeavor, Rethink India is also curating a kind of a certificate program where, on the basis of these slides, they are easier to read, comprehend, and reflect upon. And then the audio renditions, what we have tried in our own humble and small capacity, and then on the basis of it, I would say a kind of a reflection, project work, things like that, we would be offering to the larger, I would say, community of scholars, academics, and all those who want to really have a say into the larger national discourse and even the global discourse, because it is not limited to the geographical confines of the 1.5 billion people, but it is for the entire humanity to emulate, to learn from Bharat also. We have said that Anu Bhadra Karatvo Yantu Vishwataha, but at the same time, Kranavato Vishwato Aryam, the noble precepts, the noble principles, what the Arya Bharat, the noble Bharat we had, so we can offer to the whole world for that matter. So, with this, we come to the conclusion of this lecture. We will be back. We will be back again. And so, Dr. Surbi, any concluding words? You're most welcome. Yeah.
So I would just like to say that doing the vachan of such a deep and profound treatise on governance, policy, and nationalism, जिसे चिति कहा गया, soul of the nation, rooted in dharma, and which is so very profound and relevant to contemporary modern politics and Rashtra Dharma, I would say. So, with these folded hands and a prayer and prarthana to one and all, let us light the lamp of knowledge, the diya of divinity, and the torch of power to march ahead with bravery, courage, and faith.
तो आज के
Vishwas.
सत्र को हम यहीं विश्राम देते हैं, एंड देन द लेक्चर 4, द फाइनल लेक्चर ऑफ इंटीग्रल ह्यूमनिज्म, विल बी ऑफर्ड इन द नेक्स्ट सेशन ऑन 25th of April 2025, marking the seminal 6 decades of the doctrine of integral humanism. Namaskar.